I'm chairing this session this afternoon with Steve Wheeler. It seems to be a popular session, which is understandable because we're gazing into the future a little bit. I was quite amused too when I was reading the title of Steve's presentation about e-learning 3.0, because about 5 years ago there was a lot of talk about learning 2.0, essentially learning being mapped to the, I suppose, some of the changes that were occurring in terms of Web 2.0. And I actually set up a website at the time called Learning 1.5. And the reason I did was because I couldn't see that anyone was ever going to get to 2.0 in my lifetime. I would keep trying to kick them there, but in fact, in most cases, I was quite content with providing some sort of bridge between the old world and the new. So I was quite interested to see that Steve thinks much on a much grander scale than me, because he's doubled 1.5 and he's gone all the way to 3.0. And I think that whether we'll be able to take our organisations with us into the world of 3.0 is yet to be seen. But we don't really care this afternoon, because we're essentially gazing into the future and seeing what might be around the corner. Now, Steve tells me that his presentation is designed to be not a presentation, in fact, very informal, and opportunities for discussion. And you are welcome to raise points and ask questions as we go along. So with that said, I'll just make sure we're all settled down, found somewhere to sit. Then I'm going to pass over to you, Steve, and let's make a start.
Thank you. Is the mic on? It is. Good afternoon. It's a good start, isn't it? You know, say hello to each other. That's a good start. Does anyone? Is anyone on Twitter at all? Just one or two of you. Yeah. Trouble is the Wi-Fi is a bit naffy here, isn't it? Yeah. But if you are on Twitter, then I'm Timbukteeth on Twitter. Don't ask me why. Look, read it on the blog, and I'll explain. I don't want to waste time now, but say hello to me on Twitter, and I'll say hello to you back, because I'm that kind of guy, you know. But it's nice to be back here. I was here speaking in January last year, and Don Taylor invited me back. I must have done something right. Either that, or he's a mad fool, or a sadist perhaps. But I'm back now, and this is what I'm talking about, as Clive said. And as he says, I want this to be as interactive as possible, really. So if you want to ask a question or make a comment, or even tell a naughty joke or something, then maybe not the last one, but if you want to interact, then just get going, and we'll have a go at it, and we'll talk. I'm going to start off by talking not about technology, but about change and about transformation, because ultimately it's not about technology. It's about learning, and it's about changing and transforming the student or the learner's experience, for me at least. I hope you'd agree with that. So, in effect, what I'll do is I'll show you that slide there, which is a picture of New York around about 1920, the Roaring Twenties. And there's a story that relates to this, and it's a story that relates to change and transformation. Arthur C. Clarke, I think it was, once said that any technology that is significantly advanced is indistinguishable from magic. Have you heard that quote before? Hang on to that one, because that's a really important quote in relation to this story. It seems that there was a family, an American family, a man and his wife, and a boy and a girl, their children. They were living in the backwoods in the Blue Hills of Virginia. And they were a little bit backward because you didn't have much technology in them days, and it certainly wasn't in the Blue Hills of Virginia. And but they won a prize. And the prize was to go to the Big Apple for a weekend. All expenses paid. And so they were all excited about this, and they got into their best clothes, and they got on the Greyhound bus and made their way to New York. And they got off, and they looked out around them, and they looked at the skyscrapers. And they couldn't believe how tall they were. These great big buildings here. And then the woman said to her husband, "Come on, we're going to go to Macy's, that big department store I've heard so much about." And so she dragged him and the two kids, and they went off to Macy's, and they stood in this great big atrium, this great big hallway in Macy's. And there were staircases and rooms going off in all directions, and they couldn't believe how big the place was. And again, they just gaped at it and stood there, overawed by the power of this, and the hugeness of this building. And then the woman said to her daughter, "Come on, dear, we're going to go off to the ladies' fashions department and find out what the women here are wearing these days and see if we can spend some of our prize money. And so she takes the girl off, and the bloke's left standing there with his son, and they're looking around. And he notices over in the corner there's this queue of people forming. He thinks, what's happening over there? And they're forming in front of these sliding doors. And as the doors open and shut, the lights over the top of them flash away. And he thinks, what is that all about? I can't understand it. And he notices these people going in through these sliding doors. The doors shut. The lights flash. The doors open. And they've changed. And he looks again, and he can't understand how these people have changed so quickly. And again it happens, and again and again. And after a while, he sees this little old lady with a stick. Am I doing this all right? Craig, what do you think? Is it a good impersonation of you? Is it? Yeah. Right, okay. And this little he's a paratrooper, I better not be careful about that. But this little lady, she goes into these sliding doors, and the doors shut, the lights flash, the doors open, and out walks this blonde bombshell, and his eyes come out on stalks. And he turns to his son and he says, son, go and get your mother. You see, the thing is, for him it was magic. It was different. He'd never seen anything like it before. It was new. It was technology that he had not been familiar with. And in many ways, some of the stuff that you'll see here, you might not be familiar with. But it's just technology. Come on, let's be honest. It's just technology. To use the old cliche, at the end of the day, that you just press a button and it works, hopefully, unless it's Wi-Fi. But you see, the thing is, it's a means to an end. It's a vehicle, as Richard Clarke once said. It's about getting the learning to the student. It's about giving them the opportunities to learn in their own way, in their own style, at their own pace, in their own place. And the technology really is inconsequential. But there are ways of using it which will improve the student experience. Some of these are a bit out of left field, and some of them you probably are familiar with in maybe other contexts. We'll see how we get along with this. So, firstly, there's the problem. The pace of change is accelerating. How are we going to keep up with it? And how are we going to prepare our learners for a world that we don't know yet exists, that we can't predict, that is unstable, that is unpredictable? How are we going to prepare children and young people and trainees for a world of work that isn't there yet? Well, we can't, is the answer to that. What we can do, though, is help them to understand what learning is all about and try and help them to acquire some transferable skills, which they will then be able to apply in changing situations. That's what this is all about. Now, change is always something that is, I suppose, resisted, especially by large corporations and institutions. You know what this is? It's a slate. It is a technology. It was a technology of that time. And back in around about the 1700s, this is what they said when it was introduced. Up until that point, students worked on bark from trees. Can you imagine this? They said, students today can't prepare bark to calculate their problems. They depend on slate, which is more expensive. What will they do when they drop the slate and it breaks? They will be unable to write. We'll fast forward to a little bit later in the history of education. What's this? This is paper. Paper took the place of the slate. And this is what they said when paper was first introduced. These are real quotes. Students today depend on paper too much. They don't know how to write without getting chalk dust all over them. What will they do when they run out of paper? They'll be unable to write. Fast forward on again. The pen and ink. Circa around about 1900. Students today depend too much on ink. They don't know how to use a penknife to sharpen a pencil. Pen and ink will never replace the pencil. And one more, just to give you the idea. This is now the fountain pen, okay? Students today depend on expensive fountain pens. They can no longer write with a straight pen and nib. Can you see what's happening here? Can you see what happens in corporate or institutional settings? What happens is the new technology comes in and it gets resisted. I'm not using that. It's going to take me too much time. Or I have to invest too much of my energy in learning how to use a new tool. And this is why we resist. But nevertheless, those technologies are going to be there for a while, and we might as well get used to them. By the way, I just want to make a statement here. I've spoken to a lot of L&D people in the last couple of weeks. And I'm gathering that the trend now is for L&D departments to be having their budgets cut to such an extent that people are having to double up on their jobs and maybe even redundancies. If you're in that position, I just want to say this to your organization through you. The L&D department is where the creativity and innovation happens. Our industries and our job market, if you like, rely on creativity and innovation to survive. If you cut off the L&D department, then you're going to die. It's as simple as that. It's a no-brainer. That's the place where the investment should be going in the first instance. We should be investing in people, not technologies. The technology comes afterwards. But I really think we should be investing in people. And the L&D department for me is where it happens, first and foremost. This is what Eric Hoffer said about change. In times of rapid change, learners inherit the earth, while the learned find themselves beautifully equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists. And it's true. If we don't invest in people, we're going to get left behind. If we don't look at change and try and embrace it to such an extent that we get carried along with it instead of being dragged behind it, then we're going to be in trouble. And here is my first kind of gambit on what I'm calling e-learning 3.0. Some of you may remember that back about maybe 5 years ago, Stephen Downes, who's a Canadian academic friend of mine, he actually talked about e-learning 2.0 being the personification or the exemplification, if you like, of social media in education and how it was being used. Well, I'm going to try and push the envelope here a bit and go to 3.0, and I'll tell you what I mean by that, and you can obviously interact with me on it and ask questions and see if you can grasp, like I'm trying to grasp, what this actually means, what the implications are for L&D departments, for institutions, for universities, and for schools as well. So those four things there really are the four key cornerstones, if you like, of what I see it being. Firstly, we're going to be using the cloud a lot more. We're already seeing evidence of this. But we'll be using the cloud to such an extent that we won't need memories in our own devices so much anymore. They'll be there for working memory only, if that makes sense. Whereas most of the stuff we'll be doing will be placed out there away from the computer and maybe even from the institution. Now that obviously has lots of implications for things like IP and for copyright and for access and so on. But that's one of the first things I see happening. That's a trend. The second one is what I call extended smart mobile technologies. And I'll give you some examples of that as well as we go along. The third one is collaborative intelligent filtering, which to me is all about people power. It's about individuals making sense of the content out there and filtering it in such a way that it becomes useful to them in their communities of practice. And fourthly, 3D visualization and interaction. And I'll give you some examples of that as well. You've already seen some of this already in the press and on television and in adverts, and maybe you've even seen it in your own front room. It's the implications of that, things like the Xbox 360 Connect. These are things that I want to look at the future of and how we can adapt them and maybe even hack them. Okay? So that's the kind of the agenda. How are we doing? Okay? Are you with me so far? Yeah? So, here we go. This is the people we're dealing with. We're dealing with people who are always connected now. We're dealing with people who want to be always connected. And when you can't get Wi-Fi in a room and you're at a conference, it becomes a bit of an inhibition for you, doesn't it? How many of you are thinking at the moment that you can't tweet? Yeah, quite a few of you. It's on your mind over there anyway. Because there's no Wi-Fi in here at the moment. We don't know why, but we're connected. We are distributed beings in that sense. And we operate now, a lot of us, in that environment. And so we expect it. If we don't give this to our learners, where will they be and what will they think? Will they go elsewhere? Who knows? But on the other side, you've got this distraction element. This is a good book here if you want to learn about how social media and how mobile technologies are actually influencing and affecting people's lives. Then read Mark Curtis's book. I haven't got any shares in it at all. I've got an invested interest in it. It's just a good book, and I want to recommend it to you. Because he says this very important thing here, that we are connected with each other through these technologies, but that connectedness goes with us wherever we are. So that makes us even more distributed in the way we operate. And we expect that connection there wherever we are, not just in specific places. Now that should give you some clues about e-learning 3.0 and where it's going. about this almost like a kind of a martini model of any time, any place learning. Yeah? Connection, connection, connection. What's this a picture of? Anyone? Obama? Go on, a bit more. Elaborate. It's his inauguration speech in the Mall of Washington, D.C., which is a huge place. Anyone been to the Mall? Few of you. It's massive, isn't it? It goes on for 4 miles long or something, isn't it? And you can get literally hundreds of thousands of people in there, which is what's happening here. Now, can you see what's happening here? In the background, can you see what the crowd are doing? Yeah? You can see what's happening there. I'll blow it up for you. Yeah? I'll enlarge it. They've all got cameras. What they're doing is they're all connecting with each other because they're there physically, but they're also connecting with people who aren't there. And they're sharing their experiences. Now, the good thing about this is they're probably sharing their experiences. They're probably uploading onto TwitPic or whatever. And what they're doing is they're sharing their pictures with people who actually mean something to them. Maybe, friends at home or relatives or mother and father, whatever. And that is a different type of connection. It's an emotional connection, but it's also a connection which shares an experience, goes beyond the emotion. And if I just go back a minute, I just go back here. There's even a guy there with a laptop, look. Hold your laptop up, yeah? See that? It's good, isn't it? I can't imagine, but he's probably streaming it live on the web or something, But you see, the thing is, the whole idea behind this is that all the media of the world were there anyway, weren't they? All the television crews were there. It was being uplinked via satellite live around the world. Everybody was watching it. Something like 1.5 billion people watched it live. But this was a much more personal experience when you know someone who's actually there, yeah? And that's what the point I'm trying to make here, that it's a personalization of the experience that's important, and the connectedness that goes with it is the richness behind the technology. So here's the Flickrverse. So a lot of them would have been uploading their pictures onto Flickr, perhaps. Who has a Flickr account? Yeah? Go on, admit it. Who has more than one Flickr account? Yeah, one person. Oh, it's got to be Karen, isn't it? Right, it's got to be Karen that has more than one Flickr account. She's probably got about 12. But the point behind Flickr is that you can share your images. But not only that, you can actually discuss around them. The Flickrite tribe, as I call them, are actually very different to the Facebooker tribe. Facebookers are a little bit more flippant and a bit more kind of spurious in what they do with their connections, whereas Flickrites are very, very serious about their tribal behavior. And what they'll do is they'll talk to each other using, probably use these pseudonyms, but they'll talk to each other in a realistic way about what the photography means to them, what the image means to them, how it's speaking to them, how it's connecting with them emotionally. And there's quite a richness in the Flickr world. But that's an image of the Flickr, the Flickrverse as it's called. Here's another one, the Twitterverse. Quite small, but expanding quickly. Just over 100 million users at the moment. And obviously, it's being contributed to all the time. So there's content out there being developed all the time. The digital footprint of the content is expanding. A lot of it, if you went into Jane Bozarth's session earlier on, you'll know that a lot of it is quite trivial. What I had for breakfast, and my cat's been run over, and all that kind of stuff. But increasingly, there's a lot of good, rich content out there. And it's a very powerful tool. And what I think we're seeing here, this is my view on this, is that Twitter is actually becoming a part of what we would call Web 3.0 or the Semantic Web, because it has intelligent filtering capabilities. For the first time, we're able to filter out things which we don't want, so that when we step into the stream, it's the right water flowing over our toes. It's stuff we're interested in. So that's the first clue to you about what the Semantic Web is all about. It's about intelligent filtering and collaboration. Okay. And then we've got what we call the intuitive devices. You know what this is. Who's got one with them at the moment? Who's got an iPad? 2 or 3 of you. If I'd have asked that question in June when I was here, I don't think anyone would have put their hands up. Maybe one person, because they were quite new back last year. But now a lot of people are increasingly buying into them. What's so attractive about the iPad? Well, there's lots of things that are attractive about it. But one of the things that's attractive about it is it's intuitive. It's got a natural gesture interface to it. It's a bit like the iPod, which was the smaller version. I often say I've got an iPad, but it's a mini version. It's that one over there, the iPod Touch. It's my mini iPad. But the thing is, it's got this natural gesture interface to it, which, in a way, it makes it more transparent to use. I put this to you, and here's a controversial statement, but I believe that institutional learning management systems, or VLEs, or whatever you want to call them, are far too complex for us to use easily. They're difficult to navigate, they're difficult to create content on, and they're difficult to share as well. And the reason for that is because they're what I call opaque technologies. You have to think more about how to use the system than you do about the learning. And that's wrong. These kind of systems allow you to see through the technology, they become transparent, and they allow you then to be able to concentrate most of your energies and efforts onto the learning that is taking place. And that's what we've got to see more of, and I predict that that's what's going to happen. We're going to see more intuitive devices where you don't have to worry about, how do I get this thing to work, or what do I press next to get where I need to go? It's about what you're learning that's important. There's the question. This is a question which I think you all ought to think about. Increasingly, there's content there all the time. A lot of it's user-generated, but increasingly, you've got content which is important content for people to learn. How do we organize it? How do we take that content and make it manageable? In amongst the melange of data and content and information that's out there, how do we find exactly what we want, when we want it, and then be able to use it in an organized and informed way? That's a question which we'll probably come back to if we've got time. Multimedia, I've showed this slide before, but I've added to it. Multimedia brought the world into the classroom. Smart technologies are taking you back out of the classroom into the world again. That's what's happening. But the question is this. How can I capture and record everything I see? And then how can I organize it? Going back to the previous question. How can I make sense of it and make sure that it's usable after I've taken the photographs? How many times have you been on holiday and taken loads of snaps? Yeah, loads of photographs. And then you've probably never looked at them again after you got back. Yeah? Yeah? Well, I mean, there might be some gold dust in there. There might be really good shots in there which you can make use of later on for other purposes. Who knows? So I think these are valid questions related to learning. You're a quiet lot, aren't you? No questions or any comments so far? Go on. It's Ollie. Yeah, I know all your names. Go on. Absolutely. So it's not just about what you use it for, it's about what your community uses it for as well. It's the context of it. And you come back on that. That's a good point. Multiple platforms. Dare we suggest that there might be a convergence of these platforms? Or is that too much to ask of our developers and the proprietary companies that push all these tools to us? I won't mention any Blackboard. Did I just say that, Clive? But are they converging? I don't know. Is it too much to hope for? But it's a really important point to make, because interoperability, as we call it, is a big issue when it comes to making sense of the content that's out there. You're right. Yeah.
Just one comment. Sorry to touch your hopes. I definitely hope they don't converge because I like choice. I like not having to use the system.
That's a good point as well, but I'm wondering if we're really talking about choice here or usability. I leave it with you. Back here. Yeah, that's another good point. My view on this is that old technologies don't get replaced. They tend to still hang around. You just bolt onto them. So in most classrooms in the universities that I work in, you've got PowerPoint and you've got data projectors, but you've also got the overhead projector site in the corner, you know. Did you want to ask a question, Marco? You just put your hand up and scratch your head. Yeah. I better be careful with these guys. He's got my badge over there at the moment, and I might not be able to get back out again. But they're doing a good job, these techie guys.
Steve, I think this is fantastic, but you talked about photographs.
Yeah.
Okay. The other day, I found a box of photographs.
Yeah.
And boy, you look at those and you're taken back.
Yeah.
With this stuff, you're quite right. It disappears.
Yeah.
Because you never look at it.
Yeah.
And there must be a way of actually becoming more kinetic in a way that you should be able to touch these things.
Yeah. This is partly answered by the intuitive, natural gesturing systems, where you've got a tactile ability now to make pictures larger, crop them, and merge them, and so on. But yeah. There is something different about it. This is why I don't think books will ever be out of date. Again, it's an old technology, but it's still a valid one, and we'll still keep books because of the tactile nature, even the smell of it. You know, the old pages. You know, all these kind of things evoke emotions from us. I'm wondering though whether our children and our children's children will think the same. We don't know, do we? Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, people still use slates, don't they? I was in Gambia, in February last year. And we went, I started asking the teachers, what ICT do you use? And they said, come and see. And they had a room with 4 walls and a tin roof on it and a dirt floor and a blackboard. That was their technology. They've got no electricity in these places. So we have to be aware of the digital divides that still happen and still exist within the global village that we call this world of ours. So we can say, yeah, let's push this ahead. And I am pushing the envelope on this. I agree. I'm kind of trying to see into the future with you, with our crystal balls being polished, But we must not forget that 2/3 of the world's population is still a walking distance away from a fixed line telephone. They've got mobile phones, all of them, but that doesn't. Do you hear what I'm saying? So there's differentials going on which we need to be aware of. That's right. Yeah, they can do. There are some short circuits going on here. There are some shortcuts happening, but we still need to remember that lots of children in Africa don't get past primary school because there is no funding for secondary school from the state. And these kind of things knock on into the world of work. And they knock on into economies. They knock on into the cultural impact and the collective psyche of that nation. So it's not an easy thing to be talking about. I'm going to move on, and then we can keep coming back to this if you want to talk more about this, because I'm conscious of the time. This picture here, I'm not sure whether you know what this is all about, but anyone want to hazard a guess what these are? They're battery charging stations. The first one is actually in LAX, and the second one is in, I think, Singapore or Malaysia, somewhere like that. And I noticed these pictures, and I thought, these are neat ideas. I was reading Howard Rheingold as well recently, and he was talking about in Japan how they have these little lock-up devices where you put your mobile phone in, you pay your money, you take the key out, walk away, and 3 hours later you come back and your phone's charged up again. They've got them in St. Pancras too, yeah. Of course they are. They're getting them all over the place now. It's not new technology, but what I'm trying to say to you is this. It's a prosaic thing. You want to be connected, but then you run out of battery power. What do you do if you're in the middle of the high street? Well, there's a solution, and that's going to increase as well. 3 adapters. There's another differential, the technology differential, to provide mains power to you. There's lots of stuff that needs to happen to make this world a better place in terms of communicating. You're right. So there we are. But again, the question is, how will I know where to find the nearest station? Well, it's all down to the web again. It's all down to knowing where it is. But it's no good if you've got a duff phone and you can't use your internet connection. So it's a bit tautological, really. I'm just throwing these up for you because I think there are certain things we can do here. Anyone recognize this? Hey? No, it's not a battery charger. The corporates are going to love me for this. What was that? Nope, it's not a taser. I can see where you're coming from. And you're probably walking home in the dark tonight as well. But the thing is, it's not a taser and it's not a battery charger. It's a smartboard writer. It's what we would call a hacked Wii smartboard writer. This is the guy who invented it, Jimmy Lee. He took two Wii handsets, positioned them at 45 degrees angles against any image, a wall, a board, a door, whatever you want. And then with around about $40 worth of tools, he hollowed out a whiteboard pen, stuck a battery in it and a light sensor, and now you can write on any surface using those tools and a bit of software that he developed. You see, the thing is, again, where do I go to find out how to do all this, you know? All of this stuff's possible, but it's knowing how to do it. It's knowing what it can be used for. And sometimes you need to lock into a community that helps you to do this. This is why, for me, Twitter is so powerful. Because I'm following just over 1,000 people, and they're all pretty much up there when it comes to technology, which is my learning technology, which is the area that I'm interested in. And all I have to do there, really, is to put out a message and say, what about, and I'll get about 5 or 6 really considered responses back in about 2 or 3 minutes. So that's why it's so powerful for me. So we need to hack these things, I think, sometimes, and get past them. This is the Xbox 360 Kinect in action. This is the ability of the tool to be able to measure all your body positions against a cluttered background and still make sense of what you're doing with your hands and your feet. It's a phenomenal system. It works off depth cameras, which are two cameras, in fact, rather than one. The first camera is a monochrome imagery camera, and the second one is a laser infrared camera. And it stores around about 1 million images of all the different possible variations of the human body. And then very quickly it selects them frame by frame and interprets it onto the screen. Now think about the interface capability of that. And then think about how that might translate into new 3D interactive natural gesture devices, what we call non-touch interface. It's coming. It won't be long before it's here for reality. Craig. Yeah. I know what you're thinking. Yeah. 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 There's a lot of stuff that I'd like. I'd like to teleport, wouldn't you? Because I spend days of my year every year on airplanes and in airports and in the backs of taxi cabs and in buses and trains and things. I'd rather just get straight there, wouldn't you? It's not going to happen, but yet. I mean, maybe one day. I don't know, but that would be one wonderful technology. It's like Star Trek, isn't it? Remember the teleport? Remember the early days of Star Trek? Anyone want to? In the 1960s when it first came out, with those doors that slid backwards and forwards, and you thought, that'll never happen. I've got some in my hotel. What about the communicator? Touching it and you were wearing your communicator. Wow, that would never happen. What about replicators? That's a good one, isn't it? I wonder if that'll ever happen. But you see, we can dream about these things, but Hollywood does, I suppose, have some kind of inside track because, like Arthur C. Clarke said, who was a Hollywood scriptwriter, 2001, he said the quote I made at the beginning about, indistinguishable from magic. We have to have dreamers. In some countries, they shoot them or put them in prison. But we've got to have dreamers. We've got to have visionaries because without them, we're not going to see into the future enough to be able to make the changes and transform the experiences. This one here, you probably recognize this one, do you? MIT's Sixth Sense, which in effect is a few tools all cobbled together. They're actually making a version which they're going to be able to sell very shortly. But it works off the basis of your phone is in your pocket or wherever you want to hang it. And what happens is that's connected to the internet. It's connected to a mirror, a projector, and a camera. And on your fingers, you have 4 colored caps. Each one is a different color. The camera through the projector and the mirror working together will recognize those, and you can make all sorts of gestures which it will recognize and then translate those through the internet onto the computer that you're working on. And so, for instance, it'll enable you to actually make a framing gesture, and the camera will actually take a picture as you do that through the picture itself. It do other things as well. If you want to see the video on this, it's Patty Mace, M-A-E-S. Patty Mace, for a TED Talk that she did last year, I think, or the beginning of the year before. And it's well worth watching. It's only about 15 minutes long, but it's an astounding piece of video to show you what the future of natural gesturing might be like. Let's go on here a bit. It'll even project images onto things like newspapers. So the Harry Potter movie, you know, with all the moving images on it, that's going to be possible as well. Imagine the impact of that on your department, on your learners. It'll even allow you to project onto your hand if there's no other surface available, so that you can actually dial up by interrupting the field, and it will actually call the number that you've dialed on your hand. And this is a controversial one. It'll even identify your students if they allow you to, provided they're wearing white T-shirts, of course, which all my students do anyway. There's a few kind of interesting applications there, aren't there? Moving on again. All right, Craig, there you are. There's Tom Cruise in Minority Report. But if I could do, you've all seen the movie, I suspect, or if not, you've heard about it. Here are the kind of the features of that tool. Firstly, it was a natural user interface. He's moving around without having to use a mouse or a keyboard. It's all intuitive. That's the first thing. Secondly, it's non-touch. So therefore, you don't have to have any device other than what's in front of you, what the environment gives you. So that's important. The third one is it's gestural interaction, which means that it will interpret and hopefully eventually learn what your gestures mean. So if you do that, it knows you want to take a picture. Maybe if you do that, it'll say, okay, what is the question? Because you have a question. I suppose if you stick two fingers up, it will switch itself off. I don't know. But the thing is, all of these are kind of natural gestures, which you will eventually learn. This is the prediction. And the next thing is that you can also have, obviously, the speech to text, which we already know exists. But I think that's going to be even more important, particularly for things like disability and for people who have a different language to the one that is expected. Sugata Mitra, in his Hole in the Wall project recently, reported a very interesting development. He was talking to a group of people in Germany. It was a conference last year in Germany I was at, and he said that the Indian children in the village where the computer was placed, they were learning English, but he wanted them to learn it without an accent to see if it was possible to do. And so he put speech recognition software into the computer which would only respond to flat English accent. And of course they taught themselves how to do away with their accent. Several of those children now are actually grown up and working in a call center. They've got themselves jobs. And those are pretty high-paid jobs in parts of India. So, it's a desirable outcome in that sense. Some people might say, actually, that's cultural imperialism. But, there's a debate there. But the final thing is that there is a facial feature recognition software that is going to be available soon. I was listening to the guy from Microsoft speaking last month, and they're developing facial recognition software as we speak to see how it can be used for the computer to interpret signals via facial expressions. So the future is looking very exciting, if not a bit confusing. But this is the way I think the future of interfacing will go. I'm not saying there'll be a death of computing through computer keyboards and mice through this, but what I'm saying is that you'll see a gradual change happening as natural gestures and non-touch interfaces come in. And we can't get by without talking about augmented reality. AR is, I think, going to be another big thing, because we've already got the context of it, and we've already got the software as well. All we've got to do now is put them together in real teaching situations, real learning situations, where they become authentic. So for those of you who are uninitiated, augmented reality is about overlaying content from the internet or from your computer onto real-life images. So if you put your iPhone up and use the camera to look around you, you'll get a live picture. But you can overlay that with information about where you're going. So for instance, if you're looking for a tube station. You hold up and press the right context for the right software, and it will tell you where the nearest tube station is. And as you get closer to it, the image will get larger, and it will tell you the name of the tube station. Here's another version of it. There are in fact two versions. We've already seen the Wearable, but the phone app itself is what I'm talking about now. And what he's seeing there, this guy, is people who have their GPS switched on and who are twittering at the moment, who have given Twitter their geolocation. And he's seeing two people there, one right in front of him and one a little bit farther away. So you can identify other people through that as well. That could be quite interesting, but also quite dangerous as well, especially if you're trying to avoid the boss. Right? And then context-aware systems. I don't know if anyone's ever been to the Museum of Antiquities in Egypt. Have they? No? Great. It's an amazing place, isn't it? I got shown around there once by the curator. We were there on a special mission, and he took us into the back room and showed us all the mummies, which the public never get to see, and I'll never forget that. But one of the things that we're thinking about now with context-aware systems is that if you take people to a museum, for instance, then they'll get a museum guide, or maybe they'll have an audio commentary or something going on. But what if, and this is happening, what if they were able to put their camera up, or their mobile phone, and grab the context from that through a QR code or something? And the longer they stand there, the more information it gives them on that exhibit. And then they move on, but they've still got it in the memory of the phone. That's one application. Think about that. And then you can see overlays of those objects as well. So this is a picture of, I think, somewhere in Czech Republic or somewhere in Central Europe anyway. Can you imagine if you're walking around the place and you don't know what the features are, the historical features or the features, who the architect was or maybe the cultural impact of it, how long it's been there. You can find out all those details too through those kind of context-aware systems. And you can even do things like overlaying buildings which are no longer there onto where they would have been. The ancient Greek buildings or the Roman buildings or whatever. When you wander around the old city of Pompeii, or you go to Knossos on the Isle of Crete or whatever. All of these things are possible now. We're just not using them yet to that great extent. How about this in medical training? Are there any medical people here at all? Yeah? A few at the back there, yeah? I did 15 years in the NHS. Sounds like a prison sentence, doesn't it? But if we'd had this stuff then, how amazing that would have been. But now you can do a needle biopsy, for instance, by using a 3D image projected onto a normal surface, and it's almost as if you are doing it for real. There are tactile response versions now available too. And something like sports training, where you can project the image of a trajectory so that it will train people to be better at snooker or whatever the sport is. So there are already lots of applications available. It's just limited to our imagination about how we take this forward with the technology that's available. And that in turn will spawn more technology solutions. So back to those questions again. And I mean, this is time for us to start debating, I think, isn't it, Clive? How do I find stuff? How do I know it's accurate? Which is a question I hadn't asked before. How do I filter that content? How do I keep up with all the news? How do I file content? How do I categorize content? How do I do all these things? And I'll just say this: content isn't king. It's a tyrant if you're swamped by it. You get lost within it. A lot of my students complain that they don't know where to go and look for stuff because there's too much of it out there. And there's no real answer for that at the moment unless you know how to use the tools effectively. So what do you think? The floor is open again. Yeah. Yep. That's a very good point. And also, I think on the obverse side of that is about user-generated content as well, which we haven't really touched on yet, apart from when we talked about Twitter. Yeah. Could you explain more about that?
Well, now what we're finding is so much of what we need to do is organize around context. On demand is all about context.
Yeah.
We need to learn now and what's the context for why I'm doing this. And so I
Mhm.
have this, I'm sure what we're going to begin to see is we will begin to organize based on context. And we will
Mhm.
choose to make this meaningful piece based on context.
Mhm.
And that's what will become salient. So I'm curious to see what kinds of tools, system organizations come up that help us just with context.
Mm. So the king is dead, long live the queen, perhaps, yeah? Yeah, I think you're right. I think context is a lot more important these days than content. But if you do put the two together, you've got a very powerful, heady mix of learning opportunity. And the trick is actually making the two interface with each other and come together, isn't it, really? Any more comments? Yeah. 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 That's right. I'm looking at a personalized approach here, I think. It starts off with the individual. The individual is a part of society, but when they're learning, it's their own personal learning that's happening. Yeah, would you agree? So therefore, the experience is unique to them. You can set 200 people, 150 people in the room here. You'll all go away with something different from this today because you've all got your own context and your own perceptions and your own expectations and your own needs. And they're all different to everyone else's. So this is where I'm coming from with this. It starts off with the individual, and then it blooms out into small user groups, larger user groups, communities, and right out globally, I suppose, ultimately. I said earlier on that Twitter is actually like a global amplification tool, isn't it, really? Yeah. Yeah. Yes and no. It's patchy is the answer to that. Some people do teach it, some people don't. Some people let them get on with it themselves. I tend to take the middle line and say, okay, what do you think you need here? And I try and get the student perspective first, and then I try and tailor what I'm doing towards that. Over here and then down here, I think. Yeah. Go on. Yes, that's true. Mm. That's correct. Absolutely correct. Yeah, yeah. This is where. Yeah, right. Applause. Yeah. This is back to my question about how do we prepare young people and learners for a world of work that doesn't exist yet. The answer is this, because it's not about knowing facts. It's about finding what those facts are when you need them. Yeah. 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 But there was actually a caveat to that. If you read what Sagatamitra is saying at the moment, he's saying, look, children can learn on their own, but the proviso is they learn in groups, small groups. So there is still a social element there, so you're right. And you had a question? Sure, yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, going back to Sagatamitra's example again, he brings in grannies. If you haven't seen this yet, look at the YouTube videos. He brings in very knowledgeable older people who are retired and have got a bit of time on their hands, and he brings them in and links them in with these young people, and they talk to them. That's all they do. They just talk, and they learn from each other. But obviously the grannies or whoever they are actually have a lot of knowledge and wisdom, which you don't get instantly. Wisdom comes from experience, doesn't it? Over here, yeah. Yeah. there are and there aren't. I think that's something we could debate afterwards, actually. I'll take that one up with you afterwards, okay? I'm going to move on slightly now because we've only got 10 minutes left. I've got one more set of slides to show you, which I think will provide a context on that, the whole thing. So I hope you like this bit here. Web 1 was something that you could link anything to anything with, hyperlink, hypermedia, okay? Web 2 was all about user participation. It still is. You've got both those still existing. If there are such things as Web 1 and 2, Tim O'Reilly has very prescribed opinions on this, obviously. But Web 3, for me, is about reconnecting existing data for smarter uses. And this is how it works. For me, it works by breaking down all the previous silos or whatever exist of knowledge. It's about breaking down all the walls and actually having access to everything and making it smarter through smart use. It learns from you, all right? Here's the matrix. If you can imagine up here, this is progression of information connectivity, and over here you've got progression of social connectivity. And if you build these in, you'll see that Web 1 actually sits here, like this. It had a low amount of information. It was mainly push information. You had to accept what was given to you by whoever the webmaster or the company was. It was also very low in social content because you could not interact with it with the people behind it. Web 2 actually brought the social element into it. Okay, so it was the same amount of information. It still is the same amount of information. Web 3 is actually doing a little bit more on the information side, but less on the social side, as you can see from the smart technologies we've looked at so far. But here's the clue for the success of it all, what I'm calling Web X.0, or the meta web, what Stephen Downes has called the extended web, or X-Web, and Rita calls it the extended web. George Siemens has another name for it. We've had a big debate about this over the last year. But you see, the important thing is that this extended web, the first one connects the information. The second one connects people and information. The third one connects knowledge. The fourth one actually connects intelligence. And that's where we need to be headed. Can you get that? Can you see the map of that? And that's the exciting bit. Now, I've written a lot on this, and other people have written a lot on it as well. This is the point we're at now, where we're kind of wondering how we're going to get all these tools to work together in that way, so that it provides us with that access to that intelligent system and of course, the knowledge that goes with it. So I think we've got time just to finish with maybe one or two more questions. While I do that, I'll just come through here and we'll put these slides should be up on the web, shouldn't they, Clive, I think. So I'll leave these with you for later on. I won't talk about these now because we've run out of time. Those are just some of the features I see happening depending on the progression of those web, the web kind of evolution, if you like. But we do actually see evidence of the smart web already here with things like recommending systems and intelligent filtering and so on. The whole idea behind that snail there is that Andy Clark, who's a very erudite computer scientist, I think he works back in the UK now, he was in the US for a while, he said he looked out one morning and it was a cold morning and he saw all these silver trails across his garden and he realized that the slugs and the snails had been busy overnight. And he realized there was a fundamental truth there which relates to the internet, and it was this. When the snail first goes along the ground, it lays down a trail of enzymes and expends a lot of energy as it goes to reach the food that it wants. Then it comes back again. The next time a snail goes along there, it's following the enzyme trail of the previous snail. It expends less energy. So by the time snail N goes along it, there's no energy being expended at all. And it finds its way easily to the target, the goal, the food, or whatever. He said that's the way that the smart web's going to work. That's the way that meta web is going to work. It's going to be all about finding things a lot easier because previous people have laid down the path for it. We've taught the web how it should work. And that's kind of the end story, really. I'll give you my contact details. I hope that's been something that you can kind of grasp and something that inspires your imagination in some way. I'll be here for the full conference today and tomorrow, and I will pick up on some of these questions with you if you want to pursue them with me. I'm quite happy to discuss things with you here and also later on. And there's my blog post there. My blog posts are all on that website, so if you want to connect with me on that, you can do that too, or via Twitter or in some other way. So I look forward to a continuing discussion with you. Shall I hand back to you, Clive?
Yeah. I'll just say I think that's the close of the session if we're going to keep to schedule. And